Yeah, I'm complaining about it, but I think I'm fortunate. Us guys have a lot of other things to worry about.
Good morning. We're going to start this morning with an invocation from Sergeant Heather Brady, our interim chaplain at the Oklahoma City Police Department. That'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman James Cooper. Please stand.
Would you pray with me, please? Father God, we thank you for this day and for the opportunity to gather here to conduct the business of this city. I would ask for a special blessing for our mayor, city manager, city officials, and this assembled council. Thank you for the blessings you have bestowed upon our community. We ask for continued opportunities to serve and make this incredible city an even better home for all of our citizens. Father, I pray you would graciously bless these leaders with wisdom and knowledge to make the best possible decisions for our citizens, and pray their actions, words, and motives bring you honor and glory. God, we know you are the great physician and healer of all disease. We pray for your loving hand to be placed upon those in a distressing condition, not knowing the depth of their illness. We pray specifically for the doctors, nurses, paramedics, and first responders you've called to intercede for our community during this uncertain and difficult time. God, we know you have commanded us to be strong and courageous, and we know you are with us wherever we go. We thank you for your endless loving grace. We seek you here, and we seek your will for the future of our city and this great nation. In your name we pray, amen.
Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order. Obviously, we've made some slightly different arrangements in respect of our extraordinary times in which we live, but nevertheless, we have some business to address today. We'll start with Office of the Mayor. This item is stricken, and we'll now go to item 4, Journal of Council Proceedings. We can take that with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. David's not here. Okay. Now we'll move on to item 5, request for uncontested continuances. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. So we have item 3 we'd already discussed. We have the presentation that was scheduled from Roy Williams on the economic development activities with the chamber. That's been canceled. On item 5, on page 1 under revocable permits, items 6A through D have all been stricken, just given the circumstances right now. There are some of the events that would occur beyond the time of the emergency proclamation that we have right now, but we've stricken those right now. We'll come back and revisit those if the circumstances change. On page 21, item 9G1, dilapidated structures. And all of these items that I'll list will be stricken. This is item G, 322 Southeast 43rd Street. The owner has removed. Again, on page 21 under item 9H1, all of these items are stricken. This is under unsecured structures. Item A, 12 North Allen Street. The owner has secured. Item B, 528 Briarwood Drive. The owner has secured. Item H, 1608 Linwood Boulevard, the owner has secured. On page 22, continuing on unsecured structures, item S, 3411 Southwest 29th Street, the owner has secured. Item U, 2848 Southwest 39th Street, the owner has secured. Item W, 3129 Southwest 45th Street, the owner has secured. Item AA, 2501 Southeast 51st Street, the owner has secured. Item AC, 2912 Southeast 56th Street is to re-notify for additional structures. Item AE, 508 Southeast 70th Street, the owner has secured. Item AF, 912 Southeast 70th Street, the owner has secured. Item AG, 400 Northwest 84th Street, the owner has secured. Item AH, 405 Northwest 90th Street, the owner has secured. On page 22, item 9I1, 9I1. All these items are stricken. Item A, 5128 Briarwood Drive, the owner has secured. Item D, 1608 Linwood Boulevard, the owner has secured. Item N, 3411 Southwest 29th Street, the owner has secured. Item P, 2848 Southwest 39th Street, the owner has secured. Item S, 912 Southeast 70th Street, the owner has secured. Item T, 400 Northwest 84th Street, the owner has secured. On page 26, item 9T, this was a request to enter into executive session, and we're going to request to strike that. We'll reschedule that one at a later date. On page 27, item 11, on 11B and C, those were both requests for travel, and the travel that was being scheduled has been, because of the circumstances right now with the coronavirus, are being rescheduled, and so we're going to strike both items B and C. And then under item 12A on presentations under city manager reports, we are going to cancel the city council priority presentation on promoting safe and secure and thriving neighborhoods, and we'll reschedule that at a later date. That's all the items I have.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, there are no items left under item 6, revocable permits. We'll now recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through H we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. And Francis, Councilman Greenwell has entered the room. Oh, we got to do this thing? How does that work?
Just push it in.
Okay. All right. Items passed unanimously. We'll now adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Properties Authority, where we have items A through C we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCPPA and convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, where we have items A and B we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, reconvene as the council, where we find ourselves on the consent docket. I know we have a brief presentation on item AH, and there's nothing else scheduled. Is there anything else that a council member wishes to pull out for a separate vote or for separate discussion?
7AH, please.
Okay, good. We're going to have a presentation on that from Eric Winger.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Anything else?
Yes, 7AA.
Okay.
Also, I was looking at 7L.
L.
And I was looking for presentation. Oh, AT.
AT. Okay, anything else?
That's it for me.
All right, we'll take them in order, which means we'll come back to you, Councilwoman Nice, for item L.
Yes, 7L, I just wanted to make mention that this is a Brownsfield cleanup revolving loan grant, and this is an agreement for the filling station that was added to map score for the Sarah Looper Civil Rights Center and the renovation of the Freedom Center. So I know we're all excited about the Brownsfield program, and even James and I, we went to for our NLC advocacy trip, and that was one of the topics of discussion on the federal level as far as advocating for more dollars to come to our Brownsfield's programs. And I know we all can say that that tremendously benefits Oklahoma City tremendously because of all of the oil wells that we have in our communities. So we are very excited about what this is going to bring to create a new space for that filling station. And if you did not know, it is available to, as far as the register is concerned, as a place of preservation and a historic site. So we're going to work to do that as well. So I guess I probably have, am I next on the next one? AA. This right here, I wanted to make mention, and I know maybe Mr. Winger can talk a little bit more about this. but this is an agreement that we have with the Department of Transportation, and this is an enhancement grant, which I'll ask for you to speak more about. But this is to add sidewalks to Scheidler Elementary School. So we are extremely excited about what this will bring for the students and the walkability and accessibility for those young people in that community, especially when there are not a lot of accessible sidewalks in that area in general. So Mr. Winger, if you'll come and just speak to what this enhancement grant is and how it came about, please.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Eric Winger, Public Works Director. So to just add a little bit of additional information on this particular item, from time to time, we do have opportunities through the state of Oklahoma to receive grants. In one of those grants, it's a federal transportation enhancement grant specific to sidewalks, and this is an eligible project at Scheidler in Ward 7 that's able to receive those. The grants just obviously allow us to leverage city funds much further. So in the grant, the city is providing $75,000. ODOT will be providing $225,000 to complete sidewalks in the area of the school. So plans and the construction are completely done by ODOT, and construction is expected to begin this summer.
All right, well, Eric, why don't you not go too far? I think you're up for item AH.
So item AH is the next amendment to the program implementation plan for the Better Streets, Safer City program. This was an item that was previously considered by the Better Streets Advisory Board. It includes two categories of additional projects, and so as we continue to work on paving and sidewalks and streetscapes and bike lanes throughout Oklahoma City, we are now nearing the point where we're needing to authorize additional streets projects. And so this amendment includes streets in two categories. There's one category of residential that is being added, and then there's 18 additional arterial streets being added to the Better Streets, Safer City sales tax program. There was a question at the last meeting, and we had actually had an item that wasn't ready for the City Council. The Advisory Board questioned the list of the 18 arterial street projects. There was one location that was more expensive than they expected, but they did reconvene and met on that just 2 weeks ago. There were very little questions. The reason was we had additional time to discuss. The streets that are being recommended come straight from the priority list and the prioritization model that the Advisory Board and the Council previously adopted. And so these are the next 18 highest priority arterial streets, and it was recommended by the Advisory Board that the Council consider those and move these forward. So in this plan, you'll find in the documentation, it's streets only being added, 1 residential and 18 arterial. Total value is $24,500,000, and we're recommending approval of that today.
I guess my question still remains from the last meeting when we're looking at what this looks like. Was there a conversation of us possibly talking to Metro Tech when it comes to Martin Luther King and maybe sharing in that cost?
So we do have partnership projects, and that conversation did not come up at the Advisory Board meeting. But to answer the question that you're asking, we do look at partnership projects from time to time with businesses that maybe look at street improvements that are not a priority for Oklahoma City, but Kelly Avenue in this specific location is one, not Kelly, Martin Luther King at this location is one that's on the city's priority list, a street that has a very low PCI and is ready for improvement. Whether Better Streets would improve this street as a part of the sales tax, it is a street that city staff are looking for any funding opportunity to improve because it's simply just next on the list. Okay. So there was a discussion, and we provided a list of additional projects for the Advisory Board to consider to see if they wished to substitute a project in lieu of the project recommended on Martin Luther King, and they chose not to make that substitution.
Well, and that's fine, but I still would like to figure out how we can extend that conversation with Metro Tech, especially with, again, they just approved how much? It's extensive bond.
The estimated construction cost right now for that portion of Martin Luther King is $4.5 million.
Which is why I say, in that realm, why can't we have that conversation with them to figure this out? And especially because of the fact, again, as people do use that street, we have many buses that travel that street, and that is wear and tear just in that main area, in that thoroughfare of that street in particular. And I can attest to that because I ride it quite often. So just in that particular street where Metro Tech is to about 36th Street, that's where you see a lot of the bumpy and a lot of the wear and tear, and I'm sure most of that PCI level in high decrease as far as the numbers are concerned. So again, I would like to figure that part out, because that is very expensive, $4 million for this street. And again, if we're going to use this street, and we also have an institution such as Metro Tech also taking in on this street, there should not be a reason why we can't figure out a way to compromise and cut those costs as far as us taking in that cost together.
We can have a conversation with them. I know that doing street work is outside of their mission, and I don't know what limitations they might have on their funding. We can have a conversation with them and find out if there's any flexibility on that, but I'm not sure that they would have the flexibility within their funding, and I know they would see it as outside of their mission in terms of just providing for educational services.
But they also provide transportation.
But we'll have a conversation with them to see if we believe that, if they believe that's something that they can do.
All right.
May I, in regards to Martin Luther King, just as something that to put on our radar going into MAPS 4 and the beautification project specifically, with the new bus rapid transit likely to be on MLK, I'd like for us to go ahead and have on our radar from the beautification portion of MAPS, trees to line MLK a little bit better, provide shade for people who are going to be walking on those sidewalks, especially once you get from 50th and MLK to about I-44. You're reminded you're on a prairie again. And so I just really want that on everyone's mind in terms of providing people shade as they're walking from those bus stops to work or to their neighborhoods. That's something that's on my mind in addition to the street resurfacing. So let's make a note of that. And then I had received a text message from my Better Streets appointee, Tony Carfang. I share a concern that he has about, while I am very excited that we are implementing bike infrastructure across our city for people who are using bike transportation to get to work, to get to the grocery store, to get to school, etc., not just for recreation. I am deeply concerned that as we're putting in that bike infrastructure on existing streets, that some of the streets where we're placing that bike infrastructure, we're not resurfacing as well. Let me give a quick example of why this is not cosmetic. When I attended the Congress for New Urbanism last summer, and some of you already know this because you know some of these people, when we were there, a young woman who was with our group was riding a Lime scooter, hit a little bit of a pothole in the street, was launched from that scooter to the asphalt, knocked unconscious. And parents had to come in. There was another young woman who, right behind her when that accident happened, also was hurt. I think we've got to figure out some sort of funding mechanism so that when we are putting in bike infrastructure for people, we are also repaving the streets where that bike infrastructure is coming. Otherwise, we're going to see more situations like the one that the people who were with my group last year experienced. And that's just a very recent memory in my mind. So seeing my Better Streets appointee actually vote against this and bringing it to my attention as council person is something I know we've already talked about, but this is a priority. This is important.
Yeah. Mr. Carfang wasn't at the last meeting, unfortunately, but we did receive some comments from him with some of the same concerns. I would share that in the previous implementation plan amendment, not the one that's being considered today, but the one prior to this, bike lane infrastructure budgets were increased specific to making sure that we were able to address some of the resurfacing needs for the recommended bike lanes. So as staff has gone out into the field, and we have seen some of these pavement conditions that are not consistent with what a bicycle or another type of vehicle similar to a bicycle would use. We have addressed that and are doing that as a part of the future construction of bike lanes. So it may not include a full resurfacing of the street. We may see that we just resurface the lane in which the bike needs to travel, but staff and the consultants that are working diligently to implement the projects are doing just that. So we take that comment that you just made strongly and are trying to make sure that we provide safe facilities for all moving forward.
So I'm hearing that correctly, that when we're going out there and putting in that bike infrastructure, that we are looking maybe even specifically just in that lane to do some sort of...
So there is a pavement evaluation that is done. We are finding that some streets are in a good condition and can be just restriped, but there are other streets that we have to either do full or partial resurfacings for those bike facilities, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay. Then that means we're at item AT, Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I know I did see David Todd, but I know this is to speak about the plans and specifications that are going to be advertised for FD Moon Middle School renovation. If you'll just come up for a second and kind of talk about, walk us through this conversation, and then I'll take it from there after you finish.
You want to know all the items that are in the project? Is that?
Yes.
I think we'd be best served if I got Cale Wilson, the architect, is here.
Okay.
From Design Architects Plus. I'd like to have him come up and talk about what all we're doing on that project.
Good morning. Yes, FD Moon. The major items in FD Moon is a renovation. We're going to renovate the entire structure itself. But the primary items we have is code upgrades. We'll sprinkle the entire facility, look at doing HVAC upgrades to bring them to code, a bunch of door replacements. We'll go through and paint the entire facility when it comes to classrooms and flooring. There's also some upgrades in the kitchen area that we need to work on. The other primary item is ADA upgrades. This building right now is 2 stories without an elevator. We'll update with an elevator, as well as many of the toilets being updated to ADA compliance. And probably the other major item is the entrance, to have a secure entrance. We'll relocate the office and do like most of the master projects have, is a secure entrance or a controlled entrance at the main door. Those are probably the highlights, I guess, of the project itself.
And I know we had some alternates that we wanted to add to this project as well. So I wanted to, if you would, make mention of those, because hopefully if we have some willing participants and sponsors, they can hear that and want to assist us in this process.
I can provide a list of those. Some of the alternates for the project were corridor lockers, and that's replacing their existing lockers. Adding a rubber floored gymnasium. In the second gym, they have one now with a wood floor. Replacing stage curtains, adding a chair lift for the stage that's in the cafeteria. 5 and 6 are actually remodeling additional toilets. They have several toilets throughout the facility. We're doing some of them. Obviously, 2 of these are alternates. And the last item is installation of new ceiling grid in the classrooms. And we're really trying to work with owner furnished lights in this case, which will be provided by Oklahoma City Public Schools.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the reason I bring this up is because, as we all know, with what has taken place in our school system, and especially with FD Moon, this has been a school in particular that has been on the school closing list for years prior. And now, as we all know, they have decided to turn it, and it is now currently a middle school, and went from an elementary school to a middle school now. So obviously, with that, it's unfortunate that we have as many codes as we have to be upgraded for this community and this school. But this will be something, again, that is needed for the community, it's needed for the school, it's needed for the students, most importantly. And this will help to get it into compliance and obviously and hopefully build the morale of the young people that attend this school with it. So if there are any other questions about that, we're looking forward to this. We had a conversation with the community. Obviously the community is skeptical because of just what has happened and what has taken place in the past. But we have continued the conversation with the community, and we have also said as soon as this is out to bid and we know what we're looking at. We will have another conversation with the community for them to understand where we are and what this process and how we move forward. So with that, I'll close, but we are excited about what these upgrades can bring for this particular school.
All right. Well, those were all the items that anybody pulled out to discuss. Do you want to make a motion on the consent docket? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, the concurrence docket. We have items A through L we can take with one motion. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll move on now to item 9, items requiring separate votes. It's come to my attention that item B has several people here, and again, in the interest of the times we live, we'd like to get people home as soon as possible, so I'd like to pull up item B. This is an ordinance on final hearing. It was recommended for approval, but there are over 81%, or there is 81% protest, which means that it would require 7 affirmative votes. This is a 13200 Northeast 50th, going from R1 to SPUD 1190. Councilwoman Nice.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Doesn't make this hard.
Are you the applicant, sir, or represent the
For
applicant?
B?
Oh,
The wrong picture's up.
sorry, I skipped around, and we're not on that one right now.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you. Thank you.
B,
Item B.
he'll find it. Either way, as she finds that for me, the applicant is not present, and I've had difficulty with trying to get in contact with the applicant with this project, and we've been calling since Thursday with no response or no return call to our office, and we have found that there are some violations on this property that we need to address. So with that, I'm actually going to ask that we deny this application, and the reason I asked for us to deny this application is because of the fact that we have an applicant who is in the process. And one, he's not communicating with our office, and we're trying to understand what they're trying to do. 2, we have violations on this property, and it's really hard for us to allow these uses if you can't adhere to the property that's already there. So with that, I am going to ask that we deny this application.
We've got a motion and a second for a motion of denial, which, Francis, I assume only requires a simple majority, correct? Yes. I want to make a deal with the folks who signed up. I think you are all protesting. So if we vote no, you're okay not speaking, but if this motion fails, of course, I'd love to hear from you. Would that be fair? Okay. So you're agreeing if you want to deny the application?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to deny. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. The application is denied. And thank you for coming down to...
And thank you all for being here. Appreciate that.
Okay, moving back to item 9A. These are ordinances on final hearing that were recommended for approval at Planning Commission. Item 9A1 is at 9900 North Kelly, going from R1 to PUD 1693. Councilwoman Nice?
Yes, I see the applicant is present. Come on up. Now explain to us again what this use will be.
Yes, Brian Kuhn with Hewitt Zollers representing the applicant. You've seen this property before back when we had a composting facility planned, and we did not go forward with that. So we've backed off just for the hard corner, which will be commercial and office. We went through Planning Commission with unanimous vote, and we eliminated a lot of uses that the staff didn't want and restricted driveways on Britton Road. And any buildings that are put onto this property, there will have to be a special plan coming back to Planning Commission for details. So all the signage is monument signs, no EMD signs, just pretty much what you're seeing in that corner anyway, offices and some commercial, light commercial.
Okay. All right, with that, I will move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9A2 is 19,000 Terra Place, going from R1 to PUD 1736. Councilwoman Nice?
Yes, Ms. Francis, has anyone signed up to speak? Okay.
And is that going to be true for all the planning cases from here forward? Okay.
Good, wonderful. I know that we have the applicants here, so I know you all has been a long process going through the community, but I know we had a compromise with the neighbors as well as with the applicant, and as you see, I'm glad in some aspects that we didn't have any of the neighbors to protest, because obviously that means we have an agreement that has been made. So with that, I am glad to move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9A3, 7300 North Classen Boulevard, going from PUD 1618 to PUD 1751. Councilman Cooper?
Let's see. I believe the applicant is present, and I'd like to hear a bit about what they are proposing, please.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. This is a project that's been here before, and if you're familiar with the area, it's currently under construction. The reason we're back is because in the PUD originally, we were focused so much on the multifamily uses and the what I'll call the man cave uses that were really the kicker, the starter for the project, that we inadvertently left off some real common uses that would go into a mixed-use development, such as a dentist office and other type of office uses. So this PUD, it reintroduces several uses in the mixed-use area. The original plan, conceptual plan, is exactly how it's being constructed. There's residential houses on the south end there's probably 5 of them there now. These are the man cave buildings that are being constructed, and one of the buildings is complete and partially occupied. There's a smattering of offices that are under construction. There's a proposed restaurant going in here, and this is the multifamily component along Classen Boulevard. So what is in the ground today, it's a little hard to see on this, but all this paving is in, all these lots have been platted, and like I mentioned, several buildings under construction. So really the reason to be here is we're adding into this office mix some uses that would be very commonly found in a mixed-use office complex.
Just a quick question about the man cave portion of that. Would you talk to me a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, I wish there was a better word for that.
That was going to be my question.
I bet before this is over today, we will find a more productive term.
So commonly, and there's several of these projects going on around our community, these are like large storage units that have a mezzanine where a car collector could park his collection of cars or his fancy boat and be able to not live there, but certainly hang out there all day, have his friends over to watch a football game or whatever. It's really just a place, it's an extra garage, kind of a high-end thing. With our location next to Nichols Hills, there's a surprisingly high number of people who want to have a place to put their sports car or whatever other vehicle they may want to store there. So that's the intent. It's really a spare garage. It could be a she shed too.
I don't know. I like alliterations. You can call it car cave or something.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, I'm just not, really into cars as much as I'm sure the council has guessed over the last year. But that Michelle Rodriguez character in Fast and the Furious, she is, so maybe she'll have inspired more diversity in terms of car appreciation. No, I'm excited about what you all are doing over there. Terms notwithstanding, I think it's good. I'm glad that you all are taking that, and with that, I would move for approval.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, 9A4, 1111 Northwest 36th Street, going from R1 to SPUD 1171. Back to you, Councilman Cooper.
Yeah, so the applicant reached out via email and about this particular item. I had already had coffee with them. Did you want to? You're here? No? Okay. I think that's the right one. No? different one. Sorry, actually, come on up. This is a different one. Got ahead of myself. Sometimes I do that. The brain does that. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Brian Kuhn, representing the applicant. We're going to, what this is the west of the Cock of the Walk building. There's an empty lot, which we're going to pave, which we want to pave for women and men to be able to park there, both. Just wanted to
We're starting it.
Just wanted to make that point. 'Cause, and then next door to that, there's a house that the same developer owner owns. And so what we want to do is get more parking. But in Planning Commission, and I believe your request and Janice Powers' request was to leave the house. So we're going to leave the house and park behind it, which will attach to the parking lot on the vacant lot that's west of Cock of the Walk. We really want to upgrade that whole property, that whole corner, redo the parking all the way around Cock of the Walk with some sidewalks around the back and things. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I really want to thank you and Billy. Did I get that right?
Yep.
I didn't want to, in my head, I was like, what if I get that wrong too right now? No, Billy, I really thank you for taking time to sit with me for coffee, for you both listening, having respectful conversations with our Ward 2 Planning Commissioner, Ms. Powers. And I really, more importantly, appreciate, or just as importantly, appreciate you all's commitment to the walkability of that particular area and thinking about parking behind buildings as opposed to putting it up front. I just think that's very important, and I really appreciate your commitment to that and to having respectful conversations. So with that, I would move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9A5, 1129 Northwest 26th Street, going from NB Neighborhood Business District to SPUD 1176. Councilman Cooper.
Here we go. So the applicant is not present with this one. However, I spoke with the applicant and their representative over coffee a couple weeks ago. They also reached out to me via email yesterday and asked if they needed to be here. And because I'd already met with them, and because each of both the representative for the applicant and the applicant both have young families, I requested that they stay at home today. And if they had any words to share them with me, and so they did. And so I just want to read what they wrote. Oklahoma City Council members, I apologize for missing today's meeting. Given our unprecedented public health situation, I thought it best to not attend the meeting today. Thank you all for continuing the important work of Oklahoma City Council in these uncertain times. I am the applicant for SPUD 1176 and represent Nathan Cow of Omega Investments LLC, the project developer. This SPUD presents an opportunity to develop 3 underutilized parcels in a multi-family project that embraces the vision outlined in the OKC Comprehensive Plan for denser development in the urban core. The project is located just north of Super Cow grocery store and several blocks away from the key Northwest 23rd Street and Classen Boulevard intersection, which is classified as a transit-oriented zone in Plan OKC. The intersection of 2 key bus routes, several major grocery stores, several drugstores, multiple restaurants, and a newly renovated military park make this an ideal location for additional residential developments. The future bus rapid transit line will solidify the transit-oriented nature of this project and is a direct catalyst for making the project attractive for the developer. Ultimately, the additional residents living in the project area will patronize the local businesses and parks and support the upward trajectory of Uptown 23rd Street District, OKC's Asian District, and Classen Corridor. We've worked extensively with city staff in both planning and design review to develop a zoning approach that fits the aspirational goals of the comprehensive plan without negatively affecting the adjacent properties, and have received approval from the Urban Design Commission with our design approach. Thank you for considering this project. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions. And it is for that thoughtful reason I will be moving for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 9A6 at 8411 South Walker Avenue, going from O2 to SPUD 1187. Councilman Greenwell.
Thank you, Your Honor. Brian, I'm pleased to move this forward, but if you would like to say anything about the request. Yeah. Does any member of the council have any questions for Brian? This has been approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. There are no protests, so I would make a motion to approve it.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
9A7 at 9817 Southwestern, going from O2 to SPUD 1188. Councilman Greenwell.
Thank you, Your Honor. David, I do have a question, if you don't mind. As David's coming up here, this too was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, and there are no protests. David, do you have any ideas to what the planned use of this facility will be? I mean, it's currently vacant.
Sure. So it's an existing building, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. It's an existing building that's zoned office. They'd like to turn it into a salon with some associated retail. So what we've done with the SPUD is to essentially keep O2 and then add the 2 uses necessary for the client's intended use.
Thank you. Are there any questions for David? I move approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 9B was already handled, so we're moving on to 9C 1 and 2. 9C2 is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1145 and 1151 North Ellison, going from R3 to SPUD 1193. Item 9C1 is an amendment to the master design statement related to this. Councilwoman Hammond.
Is the applicant present? I wasn't sure if they would be able to make it. Sorry, this is just a multifamily development in the southern part of Classen 10 Pen to do some infill on empty lots. So I will move for approval.
So I'm going to take that as a motion to approve 9C1,
Oh, yes.
the amendment to the master design statement.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a motion on 9C1 and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
And I will motion for approval on item C2.
Okay. Got a motion and a second on item 9C2, the ordinance on final hearing. Any discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9D, ordinance on final hearing. It was recommended for approval. Special permit to operate a high-impact institutional use and rehab hospital in the I-2 Moderate Industrial District at 7900 Mid-America Boulevard. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, as you said, this is to permit a rehab hospital out around the 240 Sooner area. It passed Planning Commission unanimously. Does anyone have any questions on it? Without any questions, I would go ahead and make a move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9E, this is a public hearing, so this is regarding the ordinance relating to motor vehicles and traffic in municipal court. Mr. City Manager, is this the streetcar parking? Okay, so this is the fine for parking in front of the streetcar. This was presented at the last meeting, introduced for consideration. Today is merely the public hearing. We would consider it for final consideration at our next meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, I will move on to item 9F. This is the first of 3 meetings in our usual cycle of consideration for ordinance change. This ordinance is to be introduced today, set for public hearing March 31st, final hearing April 14th, relating to parks, recreation, cultural affairs, etc. And I believe we will have a presentation.
Yes, Jared Brady is here with Municipal Counsel's office to give us an update or an overview of what this ordinance will do.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. This is a proposed ordinance to prohibit the feeding of wildlife. The ordinance would amend 3 sections of the municipal code to prohibit individuals from feeding wildlife in city parks, lake reservations, and the North Canadian River Corridor Recreation Area. There are exceptions to this prohibition. There's an exception for activities that are otherwise specifically authorized within the code. For example, fishing is otherwise authorized. An exception may be authorized by revocable permit or special event permit, and the ordinance would not criminalize the feeding of feral cats pursuant to the city's Community Cats project. Now, why would we want to prohibit the feeding of wildlife? It turns out there are a number of negative consequences. First and foremost, it causes health problems for the wildlife. Human food simply isn't healthy for wild animals, can lead to malnourishment, and Animals cannot distinguish between food and wrappers. There are also public health concerns. An overpopulation of animals can result in a lot of animal waste, of course, and it can increase the risk of disease and virus transmission to people. Feeding wildlife interferes with animal behavior and migratory patterns, and feeding wildlife can create hazards for aviation safety, of course, and animals that are fed near roads and trails tend to remain near roads and trails, and this has become an issue on the city trails. This ordinance contains other minor cleanup items and standardizes the use of permits for other exceptions to prohibitions within each code section. So, in closing, this is an ordinance to prohibit the feeding of wildlife. Many U.S. cities have enacted similar ordinances, and as you see, prohibitions regarding feeding wildlife are relatively commonplace in the nation. Mr. Cupper and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Does it include feeding animals that are on your property?
It does not. Okay. Only city parks, lake reservations, and the North Canadian River Corridor.
All right, any other questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance for consideration?
Your Honor, just one quick question. So does the Park Department plan to provide some kind of feed for these animals that, like the geese and ducks that?
Part of the population that we have is protected under the migratory birds, U.S. federal, international wise, and we will not be providing food for those migratory birds. We want to disperse the populations and get them back into the migratory mode so that they do frequent or winter over in more southern climates and summer over in more northern climates to try to reduce the population of local birds. But we do not intend to feed the deer, the raccoons, the possums, or the wild fowl that come through.
Do you think this will have an impact on those migratory birds leaving this area?
The ones that have been indoctrinated that have spent their whole life here may not start the migratory because they don't know to migrate. But we don't want to create more populations here, stopping here and then staying here. We want to keep that migratory pattern going. And in the most part, it's not the songbirds that we are most concerned with. It's the waterfowl that inhabit most of our creeks and retention ponds, let alone our lake reservations.
Yeah, and they've taken over our neighborhood in a sense, very large groups of them. So thank you.
Okay. Want to make a motion? Anybody? Okay, motion and a second to introduce the ordinance for consideration. Again, we'll have a public hearing at our next meeting, a potential final hearing the meeting after that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9G1 is a public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution found at item 9G2, declaring that the structures are dilapidated. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9H1 is a public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for the one struck at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution found at 9H2, declaring that the structures are unsecured. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9I1 is a public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt a resolution found at 9I2, declaring that the buildings are abandoned. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9J, joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority approving the Cox Center booking policy. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, so I asked Tom Anderson to speak to this item. This is really just an update with some changes that we have at Cox Center with changing over from our contract with Renaissance and then just updating the policy because we haven't updated in a long period of time. So Tom will just give us a quick update on this.
Yes, thank you, sir. Mayor and Council, Tom Anderson, City Manager's Office. The last substantive time that we amended the booking policy for the Cox Convention Center, formerly the Myriad, was in 1998, and that resulted because we privatized the operations of that public event facility and the new arena that was under the construction of the MAPS 1 program. So SMG came in and took over the city department that oversaw that. The second reason in the late 90s was that we developed a new hotel through John Q. Hammond's. At that point in time, we only had one hotel in downtown Oklahoma City, and they did a second. They were given the management and operations of the meeting rooms and the ballrooms. So that contract has run its course, and the whole building is going to be turned over to ASM Global, which is formerly SMG. So we needed to make adjustments for that reason, and also the market has changed substantially with the new convention center that's going to be coming online, and because of that and the changes in the market and the agreements that we have with Omni, we needed to change the policy so that it would be consistent with those agreements with Omni and also to modernize the policy from what it had been in the late 90s. If there are any questions, I'd be pleased to address them.
Just a question. Once the new convention center is ready to be used, will there still be a demand for events at the Cox Center?
We believe there will be. I'll help Tom with this, and he can help me out. But we believe there will be, and we're committed to continuing, as long as we have the facility, that we're doing some studies to look at the transition there and then what other opportunities are there for development, but also that we are continuing to evaluate to make sure that anything we're doing to sell that building doesn't conflict with what we're doing with the new convention center and Omni. But we believe there will still be opportunities there that we can keep events that might not be able to go into the new convention center, that it wouldn't go to other locations, even other locations in the metro area. So we're going to evaluate that and continue to try to maximize this facility, but make sure that it's not in conflict with what we're trying to accomplish at the arena and with Omni Hotel.
Yeah, and I would suspect there'd be a difference in the pricing for holding events there versus the new convention center.
Yes, the pricing structure is going to be quite different. It's going to initially be operating in a subordinate role to the new convention center, but it has assets to it that, such as parking, which is COTPA's purview and not the city's. And also there are connections between that building and the Chesapeake Energy Arena, like the heating and cooling and the cell service upgrades, those kind of things, and we need to resolve those issues before anything happens. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. Is there a motion to adopt the joint resolution? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9K1 is a public hearing regarding a resolution found at 9K2 approving an allocation to One Red Oak LLC. This is an allocation found at 9K2 approving an allocation of $200,000 to One Red Oak regarding the Harmony project. This was presented at our last meeting. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under the public hearing portion? Seeing none, would entertain consideration of the item at 9K2, resolution approving the allocation. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9L1 is a public hearing regarding the resolution found at 9L2 approving an allocation for the Myriad Gardens Crystal Bridge Phase 2 renovation project from TIF number 8. The item at 9L2 allocates $5,958,750 for the Myriad Gardens Crystal Bridge Phase 2 renovation project. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under the public hearing portion? Seeing none, I would entertain consideration, motion perhaps, for 9L2. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9M is a resolution relating to administration of the use tax levied under ordinance number 26,345, naming said use tax the MAPS 4 Use Tax Fund, and further directing that the city manager take certain administrative actions regarding the said use tax. Of course, the use tax is the companion to the sales tax that was approved on December 10th, 2019, known as MAPS 4. Mr. City Manager, you want to speak to this?
Yes. So I talked with the council members previously, several weeks back. We had visited about this and provided a draft of what we were looking at doing. Our plan with this, just to give a little bit of history, since the MAPS for kids sales tax, we've used the use tax associated with that for two basic purposes. Primarily, it's been for operations of the MAPS office, which is a portion of that cost, and then we've used that as a source of funding for vehicle and vehicle-related equipment replacement for police and fire. And so that's been our funding source that we've used in the MAPS program since that time. We are in this resolution, this new resolution. It has some exceptions to it. Part of it is related to the fact that we're actually getting more revenue into the use tax now than what we did previously because of changes with online sales, and we're getting more revenue from online sales comes in as use tax, and so we're seeing that increase the use tax. We felt like it was good to identify exactly what we would commit to doing. So the first two items that we have that are in the resolution will continue to do what we've committed to previously. And I tried to identify target levels or cap levels of what we'll commit the funding going towards. The first portion is to the MAPS office. We're estimating that to be about 24%. About $41 million over the life of the projects. The office presumably operates longer than what the tax lasts, and so our plan is to have funding that would help carry us out beyond the end of the tax so the office could complete the projects for MAPS 4. The second item is, again, the commitment of funding for vehicle and fleet replacement for police and fire. We've got that set at an estimated 65%. What we did was went back and evaluated what we've been spending over the last several years on police and fire fleet replacement, as well as projections going forward of what the needs are. As we looked at that, we determined as we evaluated that more closely that 65% was the amount that was needed. And so going forward, that ends up being, what we did was put a cap on not to exceed $112 million over the life of the use tax. And part of that is because from year to year, depending on what equipment's being replaced, we will have situations where the amounts will increase and be at a higher level some years and be at lower levels in other years. For instance, I think over this 10-year period, both of the helicopters for police will come due for replacement. And so we've got that incorporated into our estimates. And so we cap it at $112 million. It's estimated at about 65%. But try to continue our commitment to police and fire fleet replacement. And then the third item is one that we've talked about, that we don't have a cap on this one. We've estimated it to be about 11%, and we want to get at least $18 million in there over the life of the tax to help with, it gives us flexibility the way it's written for other capital needs of the city. We would really like to focus on setting aside a capital reserve for MAPS projects, not just the MAPS 4 projects, but any of the MAPS projects. If you think back with MAPS 1, many of those facilities are getting older in their life, and the cost of capital replacements and repairs that are needed are becoming significant. And so to have that additional resource available to help with that need, as well as other capital needs that the council may identify, we've got that incorporated into this resolution. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Doesn't sound like it. Anyone want to make a motion? Got a motion and a second for the resolution found at 9M. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9N is a resolution setting a public hearing date of March 31st, 2020 for a proposed amendment to the fiscal year 2020 budget, the general fund, and the hotel motel tax special revenue fund, and establishing and setting budgets for the MAPS 4 program fund and the MAPS 4 use tax fund, and directing the city clerk to publish appropriate notice. Doug?
All right, yes, Doug Dowler, Budget Director, and what we've got here is we're adding 2 funds to our budget related to MAPS 4, and we're amending 2 funds. So 4 funds are being affected here. The first in the general fund is to receive that 1 cent temporary sales tax affiliated with the MAPS 4 program. We're estimating about $13.6 million will be received in the current year, so it's about 40, in May it will be a split check, about 40% will be for MAPS 4 and about 60% Better Street, Safer City as we kind of transition the way the tax commission collects that for it. It'll be a split check there in May, then in June it'll be the full amount coming for MAPS 4. We've set up a new operating unit, as that's our term for it, here in the general fund to receive those that temporary sales tax, and then our expectation is that that will be then transferred out of the general fund to a MAPS 4 program fund that we're establishing with this amendment. That MAPS 4 program fund is where we'll do fund the projects in MAPS 4, and again, that's about $13.6 million. So it'll be into the general fund and immediately transferred to this MAPS 4 fund, and you'll be able to see those dollar amounts there. We are also adding the MAPS 4 use tax fund that was just, the purposes were just approved here. We're estimating about $2.3 million will be received in May and June in the current year. And then the last change that we've got on here is one that we've put in here. It's for the hotel motel tax. Part of the requirement we have with our bonds that we issue at the fairgrounds is that all revenue received from the hotel motel tax related to debt service and the promotions is transferred to the PPA, to the bank that carries that debt, and then the excess is returned back. We were expecting, when we looked at this about a month or two ago, that we would have excess collections in our hotel motel tax fund and would need extra budget authority. That may not be necessary with the current change in the health situation, but we've gone ahead and included in the amendment just as a just in case. So this is just will give us the budget authority if hotel motel tax comes in to be able to transfer that to the public property authority. So in total, it's an increase in our budget of $16.4 million, about 1%. Again, these the new funds will be included in the FY21 budget as well that we'll be bringing forward in a few months.
So Doug, let me restate this, I think, correctly for the layperson who might be watching. When we adopt a budget, it's for a fiscal year that starts July 1st.
Correct.
We did that last June. And when we did that, we had no choice but to assume that 1 cent of sales collection, 1% of sales tax collection was going to end on March 31st because there was no officially approved sales tax continuing on at that time.
Yeah, the Municipal Budget Act only allows us to include those things that we're authorized to collect.
Right, and so with the passage of MAPS 4 in December, you are now amending the budget to incorporate that there will be sales tax collection for that 1 penny beginning April 1st.
That's correct.
For the remainder of that fiscal year, which is only 3 more months.
Right.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah, David.
Your Honor, this moves a little bit away from this discussion, and I'm sure Doug and Craig and others in the Finance Department have already considered this, but I would like to request, if we could, for Russell Evans to visit us again, perhaps like 60 days from now, which would be about the middle of May. It'd be better if we could wait until June, but sometime prior to the adoption of next year's budget, just to give us his perspective.
Yeah, we typically have him come in, midsummer anyway. He does a midsummer update.
Yeah.
We've been in constant communication with him as this is continuing to change, and it's something that we could arrange for an additional visit and presentation in the next couple of months to give us an update on what we think the impact is. We had a conversation last week, and the question was really, I would say, and the mayor's talked a lot about this in some of his conversations in the press release that he had, or the press conference he had on Sunday, that this is just changing so rapidly that our conversation that we had on Thursday, the circumstances are different today than they were when we had the conversation then. And so getting updates as we get a better feel for what the impacts will be is helpful. So we'll get that worked out.
Thank you.
Okay. Want to make a motion? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, so 901 is a resolution approving the request for salary continuation for Lieutenant David Brown. I don't believe we need executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9P1 is a resolution approving the request for salary continuation for Lieutenant Sean P. Simon. Don't believe we need executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9Q1 is a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority authorizing Collins, Zorn, and Wagner to present to represent municipal employees, Oklahoma City firefighters Kenneth Ritchie, Les Gay, Lee Edgerton, Steve Strother, and Johnny Hoffman in the United States District Court, a case known as Cormier v. Ritchie et al. There you go. I don't think we need executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 9R1, do we need it? I was maybe told we do need executive session for this. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we need then to take a vote on 9R2, which is to enter into executive session to discuss 9R1, which is a resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment in the case of Brewer v. City of OKC. So motion for executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll handle that at the end of our other business. Item 9S is to go into executive session to discuss the tort claim of Ricky Carter, claim 19618. Motion for executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll handle that with the other executive session at the end of our other business. Item T was struck. Item U1 is a claim recommended for denial. I don't believe there's anyone here who wishes to speak on that. We do not need to go into executive session on it. I would entertain a motion. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 10A1, claims recommended for approval. Items A through F, don't believe we need executive session. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11, items from council. We have a public hearing first. This is the second of 3 meetings regarding this proposed ordinance change. This is regarding an ordinance related to zoning and planning code, specifically telecommunication towers. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak under this public hearing? Seeing none, I was able to move so fast because there's almost no one in the chamber. We will move on to item 9B and C, which were actually struck at the beginning of the meeting. And we will now go around the horseshoe. Ward 1.
Yeah. I have several things. I'll start with just some recent goings on, and then I will speak to COVID-19 and resiliency as it relates to Ward 2. First, I would like to thank Congresswoman Kendra Horn for taking time to meet with Councilperson Nikki Nice and me about a week and a half ago-ish, somewhere in there, time's a blur now. Councilperson Nice and I attended the National League of Cities, and during our attendance, we were able to attend workshops that helped provide us resources and tools on how to speak with our elected representatives at the congressional level. I was able to learn specific bills that would help help implement more funding from the federal level for grants for things like pedestrian and bike infrastructure in our city. And that's just very important. I was also able to meet with Senator Lankford's senior staff, and I want to thank them as well. I really would like to say thank you to Congresswoman Horn for her advocacy and support of the highway funding bill and increasing those funds. Councilperson Nice and I also visited the African American Museum, and that was a humbling and informative experience, and one I'll never forget. We were there for 5 hours, and it felt like being a college student who skimmed for an exam the night before it was due, because there was just so much that I felt like we weren't even, it was the tip of an iceberg, but just very, very helpful, and it reminded me of my duty as a resident to vote, but also as my responsibility as a council person to serve. Wanted to thank the Boys and Girls Club at Northwest 36th and Classen for meeting with me to discuss the importance of connecting our most vulnerable to after school, during school, and summer break services. I want to thank those at our PIA on Linwood for taking me on a tour of their facilities a few weeks ago and giving me a better sense of how we divert folk from the county jail to services when it comes to helping them tackle substance abuse. It's very, very important work that they're doing. I wanted to thank the Treadwell neighborhood for a recent neighborhood association meeting. And with that, I actually want to transition into some thoughts I've shared publicly on social media and would like to reiterate those today from the Horseshoe. With that, I'd like to thank North Coronado Heights and Camelot neighborhood associations for canceling their upcoming neighborhood association meetings. I know that we're hearing a lot of this, some of this in the news, but I just think it's critical to reiterate how important it is to engage in social distancing right now, 3 feet from one another, as we're trying to do here today on the Horseshoe. To the young people my age, who are of drinking age, stay home. Just stay home. This is not the time to go to the bars. It just isn't. And I want to make sure that we know that this is our chance, millennials and Gen Xers, to help flatten the curve and stop the spread of this disease. My mother is 76 years old, and I want to do everything I can to make sure that I am keeping her healthy. And this is our opportunity to do that. We are not invincible, young people. We're not. And with that, I would also like to thank the folk in Ward 2, the Uptown 23rd Street District, for working with their small local businesses to move restaurants to takeout only. This is critical during this time to close our dining spaces. I can't force you from the Horseshoe to do that, but I can encourage strongly to follow suit of the good folk in Uptown 23rd, everyone from Holy Rollers to Honey Bunny to Tucker's Onion Burgers. With that, I would also say it is important that we remember that some of our most vulnerable in our city are our service industry workers. As someone who, when I finished graduate school in 2011, worked as a server. And quite frankly, since I was 16 years old, have worked in the service industry until I became a middle school teacher in 15. I've always worked as an adjunct professor or at the same time worked in the service industry. And I am so worried about what bill paying is going to look like for my friends and those who are not my friends, because I don't know them yet, who work in this industry. I don't know how they're going to pay their bills next month, their rent, their utilities. And I'm so thankful that at the city level, we have worked to halt the disconnecting of water, because if we're going to flatten this curve and work to stop the spread of this disease, making sure that we're washing our hands for those 20 seconds is important. And you can't do that if you don't have water. So I really want to thank the city of OKC for taking that critical public health step. I would like to, at this time then, ask our Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce to do everything within their power to work together with our small and big businesses to figure out how we can help those in our service industry mitigate this moment. I am to understand that the chamber has sent out a survey to its members, and I would very much, as a council person, like to see the results of that. I would also like to encourage small businesses to reach out to the OKC Chamber of Commerce. If you're not a member, reach out to them and find out how you can participate and add your voice to that survey. I just cannot stress enough, as someone who has had to borrow money and take out a loan to pay my bills before, how worried I am about these people in the service industry and the people who work paycheck to paycheck. and the half of Americans who do not have $400 in savings right now in their bank account. If my voice is quivering, it's because I am serious about this. This is pivotal. So I look forward to updates from our City Chamber of Commerce. To anyone who can afford to buy gift cards, who can afford to shop online, this is how we can support our local businesses. And you'll see that the Paseo, the Plaza District, the Asian District, all of them are doing everything they can to make sure that they're still open for business in that online capacity, and this is a way to help. Tip your server, tip your takeout person. This is critical as well. So I want to say that our Oklahoma standard is how we're going to get through this. Ward 2 and Oklahoma City, we have a history of taking care of ourselves and each other in the face of adversity. And we've been through such moments, from the arrival of Native people who settled this land to the Dust Bowl, to the bombing, to this very moment. And I have faith in us in this moment that as we distance ourselves from each other, we will be able to keep ourselves strong and come together again. So thank you so much for this moment to speak.
Well, I'd just like to echo Councilperson Cooper's comments about a lot of the folks in our service industry. I know there are a few businesses in Ward 6 who have publicly announced that they're shutting their doors for now. And yeah, when I think about all the folks who work paycheck to paycheck, the people who don't have an opportunity to stay home because of the nature of their job, I'm worried about, you know, their safety and well-being. I do want to thank our Jason Fairbrush and our Embark staff for all they're doing to keep our buses running. There are people who work in sanitation, healthcare, cashiers, folks who need to be getting to work right now to help make sure that this is that people have the necessary services they do that rely on our public transit system. So their proactivity last week of starting to increase cleaning, and even by Friday increasing that to once a day, and working to make sure that their operators are safe as well. I just really appreciate all they're doing. I also want to thank LaShawn Thompson in municipal courts, as well as our presiding Judge James and all of their staff for delaying and postponing any municipal court dockets, as well as trying to get folks that are in our county jail on city charges out of the jail on their own recognizance, so that they can go be safe at home and be out of a space that has potential for quick spread if there's any contamination in that population. Also, I want to echo Councilperson Cooper's comments about our utilities department, Chris Browning and his staff, for being proactive as well in supporting folks. I am still, you know, I think about the folks that are living outside right now, and the concerns I have about people who don't have places to isolate because they don't have a home. And just knowing that in situations like these, all the damage runs downhill. It is all the people who work concessions at the softball stadium. It's all the people who work concessions and take tickets at a Chesapeake Arena who are most vulnerable right now. And believe it or not, some of those people live outside and they still work. So just all of this cascade of the effects of this is concerning to me, as well as a number of others. The Freedom Oklahoma and the ACLU forwarded me a letter they'd like me to read, and that they're going to submit more formally later today, along with some other folks who are going to sign on. But I'll read that right now, and then I'll, like I said, they'll be forwarding that on so we can figure out how we respond to their concerns and their requests. So to the Mayor of Oklahoma City and the members of City Council, we are a group of organizers whose work addresses a variety of issues. We know that there is no community and no area of work that will be untouched by this crisis. That said, the undersigned also know all too well that in our global history, crisis is always accompanied by violence and discrimination against marginalized people. We believe it is the responsibility of the city government to ensure that risk is mitigated here in our #1OKC. Given the failure of the federal government and the obvious lack of preparedness at the state level, we are asking the city of Oklahoma City to take the following actions to protect our residents. 1, develop and share a plan for housing the sick, including people experiencing homelessness. What is the city's plan for housing people who become ill if hospitals become oversaturated? What is the city's plan for quarantine for those who test positive for COVID-19? The city should set up testing centers with protocols in place. Number 2, the city should set up testing centers with protocols in place to ensure vulnerable populations, including but not limited to those living with HIV and other immunocompromised people, not interact with anyone but the outreach workers while seeking testing. 3, the city of Oklahoma City should offer a public guarantee that calls to any health hotlines at this time remain anonymous and must not under any circumstances lead to involvement of law enforcement, ICE, or detention of callers against their will as a result of using the hotline. 4, the city of Oklahoma City should make public its protocols for shelters and outreach workers screening for illness. 5, we ask the city to provide added support to ensure baseline services for people experiencing homelessness can be maintained. 6, city government must take measures to ensure adequate protective measures for healthcare workers. 7, medical teams must be dispatched to jails, prisons, and other locked facilities to assess and treat patients. All persons held on municipal violations in Oklahoma County jails should be released immediately. I'm glad to say that our presiding judge has already set that in motion. 8, there must be aggressive public education about the illness, how it spreads, and the importance of self-quarantining during this time. The educational efforts must also actively dispel racist, xenophobic assumptions about the disease. 9, the city should develop and release to the public a plan that includes transportation assistance and accessible care for patients with disabilities. 10, the city must publicly commit that disclosure or non-disclosure of COVID-19 symptoms will not under any circumstances lead to criminalization, involvement of family court, or involvement with immigration authorities. 11, the city should cease clearing any homeless encampments and respect the ability for people experiencing homelessness to self-isolate in place. In the absence of leadership at the national level and the state government's clear unpreparedness for the task of hand, the city of Oklahoma City has an opportunity and responsibility to lead residents through this challenge. We hope the city takes this opportunity seriously before it is too late. I'll leave it there, but like I said, I will submit that letter when it comes through to me with all the signatories, and we'll be happy to work in response with any other departments that can help address any of those concerns. Thank you.
Yes, amid what's happening as well, I wanted to say thank you our airports for taking a proactive stance, ensuring that we still have safety when it comes to those who come through, as well as our zoo. I know that was a really hard decision for them to make in the wake of what's happening in spring break, but obviously y'all know that safety and the health of our community, our city, is first and foremost. So I wanted to mention those, as well as that has already been said with our utilities, also our county court, district courts, our municipal courts, for taking into consideration our community. As we're looking at what's happening, my concern obviously has been the food insecurity that we already have in our community. So we have continuously updated the OKC website with options for the community, and I will add that Restore OKC, they have a market which they are now open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. for those who may need to shop. And their address is 2022 Northeast 27th Street. I also understand Skyline Ministries food distribution is happening at Mount Triumph at 11 this morning, and they'll be doing those. This is in addition to those other distributions that are taking place. Their address at Mount Triumph Baptist Church, 7 Abram Ross Avenue. And as far as the infant crisis services, they are still going to continue to work for that people get the services that they need, but they are now going to a drive-through visit situation. So if you have information about that, you can call 405-528-3663. And Beth made mention, Councilwoman Hammond made mention to me about Homeland, and they are doing at-risk, those who are at risk, like our seniors or some of our younger children, 7 to 8 a.m. early shopping for them in the wake of what's taking place. So we are still waiting to understand what our Oklahoma City Public Schools are going to. They had a meeting today, so we'll find out more information as far as what that looks like for our young people and distribution on that forefront. I wanted to also, as we've been talking about some of our, been faced with a lot of conversation about medical marijuana, dispensaries, and all of those things that are taking place. I'm hoping that we can work to defer future zoning requests that come in front of us until we are able to work through the conversation of how it should be zoned and just some of those regulations that we know we can add to this conversation. And I'm in thought of Mr. Frederick O'Keen. This is another dispensary on Northeast 23rd Street where a gentleman was gunned down as an owner of a dispensary. So there's a lot of things that are taking place, especially because there are a lot of regulations on the state level when it comes to handling of the money and those types of things that we have our business owners who are at risk when they do have these dispensaries. And to my knowledge, we're still waiting to hear word of who committed this crime. So we'll continue to stay updated on that, and we ask for anyone that has information to report that to the police. But in some other better news, Census 2020 is here, and we're asking, I know this is heavily going to impact our census count, what's taking place right now, but I know I have seen folks saying they have received their census documents as far as the questionnaire, and we ask that people still continue to work through that and work through what needs to take place for us to make sure we get counted. And our advocacy trip, as you heard from Councilperson Cooper, we had a really informative couple of days of discussion, and I did get to sit down with Senator Lankford in his office. He has Java with James on Wednesday morning, and folks from Oklahoma gather in his office and talk about what's going on. So that was really interesting to see how many people were in the room from Oklahoma in D.C. During this weekend. And also our national PTA president is from Northeast Oklahoma City, Anna King, and she was in this meeting. So they were there advocating on the national level for legislation for PTA as well. So also Congresswoman Horan, she was very open to the things that we're asking for and how we advocate better. And we also learned about some other ways we can advocate, and special thanks to our lobbyists that work with us too on the federal level. They were very attentive to our conversations and our asks that we were asking for when it comes to our local level. Want to give a shout out to the Star Spencer 7th grade class from Ms. Jackson. In January, they won the Thunder Stat Lab, and they were awarded $5,000 worth of technology, and each student got a pair of Nike. So it's those types of stories you don't hear a lot about, but it's always good to make sure we say we appreciate and we are proud of our young people. Also, Millwood, they won #1 in their robotics program. And as we continue to talk about Women's History Month and those effects, as we did go to the National Museum of African American History, the women part of that, and even at the Capitol, they had a suffrage exhibit, U.S. Capitol suffrage exhibit, right in the wake of a picture and a bust of Sojourner Truth. So seeing that and talking about women's suffrage was awesome. And I finally got to lay my eyes on the Oklahoma Federation of Colored Women's Club banner. So it was just a joy to see it on a national level, that Oklahoma is represented for the women have done so much in Oklahoma. And I just want to recognize, because I went to the Oklahoma Historic Black Towns banquet a couple weeks ago. We have at least five that I know of that were recognized, female African-American mayors in Oklahoma, from Tatum's, Clearview, Redbird, and Langston. They sit right now as mayors in Oklahoma. And I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about, especially when it comes to African, and just them being in this type of leadership role as mayors of cities, towns, villages. And that's just an awesome thing. So I'll leave and close with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12, city manager reports.
Yes, sir. We canceled the presentation. The only other items we have are claims and payroll, and then the March sales and use tax collections. In the report, it notes that currently sales and use tax collections are on target, and my expectation is with COVID-19 and the response within the community to that's going to change, that we'll see sales tax revenues drop off. We're really expecting that to be significant, and we are prepared to respond to that. I feel like we've got the flexibility within our budget right now. Both from the standpoint of right now, expenditures are well below budget, so I think we're in good position to have some room there, as well as having reserves if we had to call on those. We'll do all that we can not to do that, just not knowing how long this might last and what we might have to have in our options to respond next year. But we do have the flexibility right now to continue this. We're looking at options to further reduce costs, to control expenditures, and be announcing some of that later this week. We have put a travel ban in place right now, really more so in relation to in response to the virus and not exposing our employees by having them travel. But there are some actions we'll be taking in relation to just managing our costs and being prudent with our budget, and we'll continue to monitor this and make sure that we keep the council up to date on changes as they occur. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Now we're at item 13, citizens to be heard. Michael Washington.
Michael Washington, 2900 Northeast 18th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. But first of all, I wasn't here during these earlier proceedings, but I do want you to know I filed a civil rights complaint against various officials, no naming at this moment, here in the city level. And again, we're preparing ourselves to also create litigation regarding our Freedom Center. It will not be tolerated by this facility, by this committee, by this horseshoe on any level. You will not be getting the Freedom Center. That would be my next project in civil litigation that I have going. I haven't decided yet who I'm going to target, because I believe there are various officials here who innocently told to believe that they may be doing the right thing. However, I have spoken to a few of us who know better than what they should be doing. And for the most part, I believe that God is on my side. I will not be disrespected. I will not be disregarded. I will not be totally overlooked when I alone preserve this Freedom Center for the history. And I know that you people here who run this city knows that there are millions of dollars that's going to be coming in through various transits, as well as tourist attractions and what have you. And we know that with this $25 million that y'all propose to give us, we know that's usurping authorities, because you're trying to say, for the most part, that if we don't give you our Freedom Center, we do not get the $25 million allegedly set aside for this project. And also, for the most part, the money is only there to delay the prospect of this facility, humongous, gigantic historical monument, from being uplifted to a degree of respectability. Now, and again, you're doing it because you have those other people on your side. Again, that guy can't stand Leonard Benton. Let me tell you what, you know, I'll tell you this, Tim Lane said, put it like this here. If he's sick, I'll take him to the hospital. Other than that man ain't got nothing for me, and none of them people he's working with. Now don't let me name any more names while I'm at it. Now then, it is not right for you to try and take, and you people know for the most part that with that money on the east side, African Americans will be able to come up independently and stop having to beg for stipends from this entity, as well as other state agencies. The Freedom Center is the longest city and movement throughout the whole United States. Thereby, what does that entail then? That means that a lot of things that were going on who didn't know about Oklahoma are going to start coming to Oklahoma now, and that's going to draw in more and more committees and people now who want to come in and live in this so-called great state. And in living in this great state, then you're going to also want to come in and know what this Freedom Center stood for. Now, for the most part, everybody believes that Greenwell, North Carolina was the longest city-end movement. Well, it didn't come about almost 2 years after the fact. In closing, I believe that Clara Luper is resting peacefully and humbly in efforts that I've done.
Michael, you're at 3 minutes. Thank you.
And I thank y'all very much. Lawsuits on y'all next.
Joy Reardon.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I just made a trip to Las Vegas for the largest construction expo out there. And the ADA that they have created, I wish we could model our city a lot more after what they've done, because some of the sidewalks and stuff like that are in desperate need of repair. I thank y'all for what you've done this morning. I sat back in my normal spot and listened. But we need to do more for the sidewalks. Prime example, Northwest Classic High School. The sidewalk right there, once you get off the bus, at the bus shelter, there's actually there's no curb ramps. Because I was over there before I left my trip. Dental place, Depot Dental, whatever it's called, they put in ramps where there weren't none. There are several others, and I'm trying to get a meeting with Embark to see with whatever this thing they're doing with the bus stops and bus shelters and stuff to get it fixed. And I can't seem to get that done. If one of y'all could help me, I would appreciate it. The scooter issue. Out there, they don't have scooters. The scooter issue here has got totally out of control, and something needs to be done about it. People are taking advantage of y'all with the fact that they'll just park them right in the middle of the sidewalk. And like I've said before, we're celebrating 30 years of ADA. We should be better at controlling stuff like this. Give the police more bite. Give them more teeth to deal with kids on the scooters and stuff like that. That's all I really had this morning. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. That concludes everyone who has signed up for Citizens to be Heard. We have 2 items to handle in executive session, one of which, 9R2, may lead to consideration after executive session of 9R1. So we will return after executive session and for potential consideration of a resolution. Thank you.